Today is Chof He'iyar. Now I want to say again, tomorrow is the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War. Tomorrow, Chof He'iyar, is the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War. And it was the same arrangement of the days of the week. That year, 1967, last Shabbos, that means yesterday we read Bamidbar. So they had Noseh before Shavuos. We had Bahar B'Chukeseh. But besides that, it's the same arrangement. And tomorrow I'm going to talk about it. If you're interested, I want to talk about the Six-Day War. I'll repeat all the things I've been saying. I just want to share this because I think, to me, it's a gefil, it's a hergish, and hergishim are whatever they're worth, but I think there's credibility to this. The Six-Day War is famous because of the nisim that happened during the Six-Day War. They really are incredible miracles. They're historic. They're miracles, as Goyim were saying, of a biblical nature. These kinds of miracles you have in Tanakh. Mamish. But there's something which is not emphasized enough that I think is actually more important. And again, I was 2 during the Six-Day War. So my father says, "You remember?" I said, "How can I remember I was 2?" He says, "Medir came when the Shvis." I don't remember. But a lot of you remember. The story of the Six-Day War that's underrelated is the feeling of Achdus Yisrael that prevailed at that time. Again, I don't remember this, but I've heard this from people, not necessarily from people. I heard this from various different people. There was a feeling of Jewish solidarity, there was a feeling of Jewish unity, which was extraordinary. It was very unusual, because it cut through all lines. There were virtually no separations. In other words, if you were Jewish, every Jew was your brother, and every Jew was your sister. Whether you were a reformer, you were Orthodox, if you were a Chassid, you were Misnagid, you lived in America, you lived in Israel, you lived who knows where. There was an awakening of a Jewish identity, which was incredibly, incredibly deep, and very, very unusual. And of course, as you know, during the Holocaust, when there was 6 million Jews were murdered, Al Kiddush Hashem, places where the Holocaust did not affect directly, there was a sense of distance. American Jews did not experience the Holocaust as a personal tragedy. Certainly not while it was going on. There was a distance. And I'm not bringing this up to say Lashon Hara. I'm bringing it to make the point. Something happened in the weeks leading up to the Six-Day War and during that war that woke up Yidden across the world. If you were a Jew, this was your concern. It made no difference how you lived your life whatsoever. It was a very special moment. And if you remember it, I'm assuming that you remember this. Now, of course, when you look at it in Das Tachten, if you want to explain it sociologically, you will explain 20 years before there was a Holocaust. And if, God forbid, Nasser had won, it wouldn't have been that Israel would have lost an inch or 2 of land. You understand? He threatened to continue the kinds of activities that were done in Europe 20 years earlier. So you could explain it sociologically that because of the recent past, Jews were very awakened. But I don't think that's true. I really don't think that's true for a variety of reasons, and we can debate it. I don't want to argue about it. I'm the teacher, I'm right, that's the end of the story. In my mind, based to some extent, to a great extent, on the way the Rebbe responded to the Six-Day War, the Six-Day War was an awakening of a Yiddish neshama. The Yechidish Benefesh, the Pintel Yid was aroused. It was something very special, very surreal, it was unusual, it didn't make sense. And it's something which awakened every single Yid, B'chol Katzvei Teva, wherever they were in the world, because there was a moment of the Jewish awakening that maybe Bechitzonius was precipitated by certain events, but Bepnimius it was much deeper than that. And again, tomorrow I'm going to repeat the same things I said yesterday and on Friday, and I've been talking about it for a while already. The Rebbe's reaction to the Six-Day War was to identify the era as the era of tshuva. In other words, the way I look at it, and I'm talking to you, but I'm a no one. But the way I see it, 50 years ago tomorrow began the tshuva movement. That's not true. The tshuva movement started from the first time a person needed to do tshuva, there was even not tshuva. But the idea of awakening of a Jewish neshama, believe it, tomorrow I'll talk more about it. It seems to me, Six-Day War was much more than a miracle in Eretz Yisrael. It was awakening of Yiddish neshamas. and has a very, very strong relationship with Mashiach, Tzidkenu, because we all know the connection between Mashiach and Inyan HaTshuva, and tomorrow is the 50th anniversary, and I just feel like Madashach and them kochen. I have a shir for men, and if you're familiar with me online, I'm going to put up these classes. I'm going to put all these classes up. I can't teach it here because I don't have enough days, but I'm believing that there's a number of sichos that the Rebbe spoke around the 6-day war. This Thursday night, I gave a shir to men on the sicha of Mifsat Film. Mifsat Film started yesterday. 50 years ago yesterday, the Rebbe announced Mifsat Film. The first of the 10 Miftzoi, Mifsat Film, started Shabbos, 2 days before the war. That means today, 50 years ago, was the first time they ran around putting film on Yidden. By Shavuos, which is a few days later, 10 days later, they had put film on with 100,000 Yidden who were not wearing film. And I don't want to, how do I say this? I want to teach you Tanya. I don't want to spend the whole hour, but I just feel like we're living through a special time. And the Rebbe always says, that when you talk about an event, and you relate to the event, so the event happens for you. I was 2 years old, but from all the people who I know, who lived through the 6-day war, they described to me the fear, the pachad. It was a real danger. There was, nobody knew what it was going to be. They described to me the lone voice of the Rebbe, who was so unafraid and so optimistic and so positive. I have a teacher of mine who once told me, when did the Rebbe go from being the Lubavitcher Rebbe to being the Rebbe? And he answered, the 6-day war. Until the 6th day where he was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and then he was the Rebbe, because the clarity and the betachin and the optimism that the Rebbe gave, every Israeli felt, every Jew in the world felt, because the words of the Rebbe reached everybody, not to be afraid, lo yonim v'lo yishin shem Yisrael, and so on. So I feel like by us bringing about this, we push it holding. This is my hergish, but I feel that 50 years ago tomorrow began the Tchuvas HaTshuva. In a spiritual sense. And I'll talk about it tomorrow, Bariches B'li Neder. And it's time for Mashiach. The hechste Zeit for Bias HaMashiach. Okay, I said enough today. I don't want to give away my whole speech today. You're not going to come back tomorrow. So B'li Neder, tomorrow we'll talk about the 6-day war, and it's not just the Minisim. I think that if you understand the 6th, we're learning Tanya, okay? We're learning Perek Aleph, and we're near the very, very end of the Perek. And we're holding, I think it's the first line on page Vav. The first line on page 11, in other words, after page 10, comes 11, V'gam mides tevis shebeteva kol Yisrael b'tel desim. I'm doing something very unusual for me. I'm not rereading all the things I read to you last week, and 2 weeks ago, and 3 weeks ago, and 4 weeks ago, 5. We're talking about the Nefesh HaBahamis. The Nefesh HaBahamis, the animal soul. And we spent a very, very long time analyzing the Nefesh HaLekisa, the Nefesh HaBahamis. We translated many words. Klipo and Sitra, Achara. We spent a lot of time. The idea that the Nefesh HaLekisa is in the Moyach, the Nefesh HaBahamis in the Leiv, Dam HaAdam. And last Sunday, we discussed the Midas Reis. I explained in specific, I got a text from somebody, such a wise lady. I went through last week's class, all of the Midas Reis, what's Kas and what's Gaiva and what's Taivas Tanugim. So she sent me a message. Maybe you can explain to us the Midas Taivas too. Anyway, I don't know where in Tanya Dal today but discusses the Midas Taivas. But okay, point well taken. But now begins talking Midas Taivas, it's V'gam. So we're in the middle of a conversation. Right in the middle of a conversation. And the conversation is talking about the animal soul, the Nefesh HaBahamis, the animal soul. And when it comes to the animal soul, the Alter Rebbe, when it comes to the animal soul, the Alter Rebbe breaks it up into 4 Yosedis, 4 elements. There's fire, wind, water, and earth. And of course, everybody has all 4 elements, but some people have a disposition, have a Tchunas HaNefesh, which is closer to one, and other people have a disposition, or a Tchunas HaNefesh, which is closer to the other. Eish, Ruach, Mayim, and Naf. And the Alter Rebbe brings for each one of the different Yesodis, of the natural elements, which Midas Reis, which natural tendencies, which are called Ra, come from it. So Alter Rebbe continues, says, V'gam, in addition, Midas Tevis, good character traits. Shebeteva kol Yisrael b'tel deis, which exists in the nature of a Jew from birth. Kemei, for example, what good character traits exist in the nature of a Jew from birth. Rachmanis ugemilas chasadim. Rachmanis is translated in English as compassion. And gemilas chasadim means kindness and generosity and charity. Boys, mimena come from this nefesh habahamis, the animal soul, the nefesh habahamis, but here specifically specifies the nefesh habahamis of a yid has midas tevis, has good character, and he gives you several examples of good character traits of the nefesh habahamis of a yid. Rachmanis means compassion, and chasadim means kindness. By a yid, the nefesh habahamis, you have these midas. Why? Ki b'Yisrael. Now, in other words, the question is, if the nefesh habahamis is klipa, if the nefesh habahamis is sitra achra, if the nefesh habahamis is all the things that we've been learning about for all of these weeks and months, how could anything good come from the nefesh habahamis? So he answers, ki, the answer is, b'Yisrael, when you're talking about a yid, nefesh zu de klipa, this soul, although it comes from klipa, and we know what klipa means. Klipa means, I get my reality from the Eibishter, and I cannot access the Eibishter within me. That's what klipa means. There's a spark of Hashem in me which is unavailable to me. I cannot access the God within me. If I can't access the God within me, I'm a prisoner to my form. You have a spark of the Eibishter inside of you. That's an infinity. That's an Ein Sof. If you can access that spark, it can spark you to great things. But if it's klipa, that means you have no access to that spark. So whatever you are on the outside is the way you remain. You're not in a position to in any way adapt. That's why it's called klipa. So the nefesh habahamis comes from klipa. And if it comes from klipa, it's trapped in its form. It doesn't have access to the God within inside of itself. If it's trapped within its form and doesn't have access to the God within inside of itself, how could anything good come from it? So the Alter Rebbe answers, Ki Yisrael, in a yid, nefesh zu de klipa. This spirit of klipa is meklipas nega, from a klipa which is called noiga. Noiga basically means a dim light. Sheyesh ba gam kein teiv. The klipa which is called nega also has good. Vehi, and the klipa which is called nega, as we say, it's a das teva ra. It's still connected to where teva and ra are together. Right? There's Eitz HaChayim, the tree of life, that's kedusha. Eitz HaDas teva ra is the beginning of the creation of klipa, but in the level where the Eitz HaDas teva ra are still together, this is where the nefesh habahamis of a yid comes from, and therefore in the nefesh habahamis, in the animal soul of a yid, there are teva for midas tevas. So now I have so many things to say, and I can't figure out which one to say first and which one to say second. Bemis. And I have to organize this in my mind, and I have to keep track. I shouldn't repeat myself, and I shouldn't miss anything. Let me start with the following. We are learning Pnimiyas HaTorah. Learning Tanya. Tanya is Nishmasa Derais, it's Pnimiyas HaTorah. And for those who are here regularly, in other words, over the last handful of weeks, I explained to you what that means. Learning Pnimiyas HaTorah means, in effect, that you're learning what we call Torah Bashamayim. You're learning a heavenly Torah. You're learning Torah how it's learned in Gan Eden. Nigla the Torah, the halachic level of Torah, is Torah Lo Bashamayim. It's dafka not in heaven. That's the Nigla dimension. But when a Yid on this earth studies Seides HaTorah, Pnimiyas HaTorah, Kabbalah, Chassidus, he's learning a Torah that's learned in heaven. Now, of course, the wonder is, what's so extraordinary is, that this is being learned by regular people, right? That Mukubbalah learn Kabbalah, that's their neshama, and that's their role, and that's their inyan. Chassidus takes Pnimiyas HaTorah, a Torah which is a heavenly Torah, and gives it to plain Pashat Yidden, that they should also have this Nishmas HaDerais. So in the recent classes, in the last couple of classes, I told you the difference between Torah Le Bashamayim and Torah Bashamayim. What is the difference between a Torah on this earth, Nigla of Torah, and how a Yid on this world learns a Torah, but how the Torah is learned in Gan Eden? It's very important to get this. Because if you don't get this, the Tanya doesn't make any sense. When you get it, it makes you very uncomfortable, and me very uncomfortable, but that's what Tanya is. The difference between Torah Bashamayim and Torah B'Aretz is very simple. The way Torah was given to human beings on this earth, Torah divides up the world into three groups. There's three categories of stuff on this earth. There's Choiv, that means mandated things, things that you must do, compulsory things, mitzvahs. There is isur, there's prohibited things, there's things that you're not allowed to do. And then there's a middle category that's called the reshus. Reshus, in simple words, means do whatever you want. It's free. You're not obligated to do it. It's not disallowed. It's yours. Do what you wish. And if you understand life and you understand the world, you know that the vast majority of things that we're involved with are neither tchayv nor isser. They go into the category of the shus. Right? Most foods are kosher. Most clothing are allowed. Most homes you can live in. There's things which are not allowed, but not allowed is not 80 or 90% of what's on this earth. It's a lesser percentage. Shame. But when you learn learn Tanya, and the Tanya turns at the two dots on the bottom of page 10, as I explained it to you. Until then, the Alter Rebbe was starting with Nigla and transitioning, going from Nigla to Nisted. So beginning on the bottom of page 10, the Alter Rebbe began discussing Nisted the Torah, Pnimis HaTorah, Chassidus and Kabbalah. And when you're learning Torah Bashamayim, there's no three things, there's only two things. And they are Kedusha and Klipa, period. What's the criteria of Kedusha and Klipa? It's very simple. Kedusha is davar shebatel etzli yisbarach. Kedusha has two rules. For something to be Kedusha, has to have two criteria. Number one, it has to be batel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And number two, that the Eibishter rests. That's Kedusha. What's Klipa? Everything else. What's Klipa? Everything else. If it's not Kedusha, it's Klipa. Kedusha means davar shebatel etzli yisbarach, something which is batel to Hashem, and therefore the Eibishter rests. Klipa sitra achara, Peter sitra achara, tzad achara, she'eni tzad kedusha. On a higher level, when you're learning Torah as it is in heaven, there's no such thing as neutral. In Nigla the Torah, in Halacha, there's Isid, and there's Chayv, and there's Reshus. Things that you have to do, things you're not allowed to do, and the vast majority of the things we're involved with on this earth are neutral. Do what you wish. In Pnimis HaTorah, there's no neutral. If it's not positive, it's automatically the opposite of positive. And I want to give you an interesting insight that's found in Tanya to help argue this. In other words, all over the Tanya, this idea is going to recur. The Tanya is constantly going to be giving us this very serious measure, this serious standard, that there's only two things. There's Kedusha and there's everything else. And if it's not Kedusha, it's Klipa. Kedusha means davar shebatel etzli yisbarach, something which is nullified to the Eibishter, and because it's batel, the Eibishter rests. What's Klipa? Everything else. So there's a very interesting way the Alter Rebbe describes it. Here's what he says. He says, you cannot do anything without life. You cannot do anything without life. Everything you do requires energy, life. You have to do it, life. So everything you do has to draw life from someplace. Everything you do in your behavioral life, that I do in my behavioral life, gets chayis from someplace. So where does it get chayis from? From ruchnius. The physical reality lives from the spiritual reality. That's the way the Eibishter made the world. The physical reality lives from the spiritual reality. So where you're drawing life from? So there's only two sources. I either get life from Kedusha, or I get life from the opposite of Kedusha. And the Alter Rebbe's terminology is Tumah and Tahara. If a person draws life from something which is not Kedusha, they're connected to Tumah. In other words, one of the ways of helping appreciate this standard, where you don't divide things into three groupings, Chayv, Isser, and Reshus, but you divide it into two groupings of Kedusha and Klipas, to appreciate whenever you do something, you are connected to something. And when you're connected to something, you draw life from that thing. That thing is either pure or impure. Be that as it may, this is how the Tanya works. The Tanya speaks on this madrega. The Tanya speaks of dividing things. If it's in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if it's batel to the Eibush, and the Shechina rests, it's Kedusha. Otherwise, it's Klipa v'Sitra Achas, the other side. And on that basis, something very, very important emerges. Something very important emerges. And it gets very complicated, by the way, but basically it's very, very important. The definition of good and evil is very different. How do you understand good and evil in Elam Hazeh? What's good and evil? What's good in this world and what's bad in this world? If I go over to you and I hit you, that's bad. If I go over to you and I steal your money, that's bad. Even if I'm jealous of you to the point where it makes me angry, we can understand that that's bad also. But if I enjoy my life, material, who am I hurting? if I enjoy my food, I enjoy my clothing, what's the crime? What's the aveda? The expression that people use on me, what's wrong? Who am I hurting? We define good and evil in a very basic sense. Evil means you're hurting somebody else. If you're a religious person, evil means I'm hurting myself. But not everything that everybody does is evil. Faket, most of the things that most of the people do in this world are not bad at all. They don't bother anybody. But when you learn Pnimiyas HaTorah, when you learn Chassidus, they have a whole different measure, a completely different criterion for these ideas. The criterion is, I exist as a servant of the Eibishter. What I do in the service of the Eibishter is good. What I do that's not in the service of the Eibishter is serving me. And if it's serving me, it's klipa. And klipa is not good. This is one of the hardest things to get used to in the Tanya. Which leads us to the point. There's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch, there's a din in Shulchan Aruch, that if you lose money and a poor person finds it, you're fulfilling the mitzvah of tzedakah. Why? Because the person who found the money doesn't care how he got it. They can buy breakfast. In other words, the idea of doing tzedakah is measured simply in the one who receives it. Somebody benefited from you, you did a good deed. When people give tzedakah, you know how America works. Americans give more tzedakah than anybody else in history. And I think they took a lead from Jewish people. Yeah? But they want something back. It's called kavod. I've told this to you before. It's a true story. I know it was a second hand. I know from somebody who was at the dinner. It was a Yid who goes back 50 years or 60 years, donated $50,000 to a yeshiva. $50,000 in the 1960s was an awful lot of money. He took care of the entire dinner. The dinner was managed out of his business office. At the dinner, he was honored with a plaque that was made of gold that costed $36,000. Now, is this a good person or a bad person? Think about it. What a yes! True story. It happened Paltiel mamish. That yeshiva lived on those $14,000 who knows how many months. You have to hold your nose when you're involved in such a situation. Yeah? But who cares? The bottom line is, in America you give tzedakah and you get covered, you get notoriety, you get respect, you get, I don't know, whatever it is. Yeah? So in practical terms, that's an incredible thing. He gave $14,000 of tzedakah, and he somebody told me there was a guy who used to give money to the Lubavitch yeshiva. He was committed. The guy couldn't carry a tune. So he would get up by the dinner and sing, and everyone would clap. And people would sit at the dinner, they could barely contain their laughter. And when he finished, he had to clap, so he should sing an encore. Because the more songs he sang, the more money he gave the yeshiva. The poor guy had no idea that every time he sang the same song, it was a whole different melody than the time before, because he couldn't carry a tune. That's Olam Hazeh, you understand? So it's tzedakah. When the Alter Rebbe says here that the nefesh habahamis of a yid has rachmanis and gemilas chasadim, it doesn't mean that. When a person gives tzedakah reciprocally, I'm giving to get, that's not called midas tevis. In other words, when you understand the world of the Tanya, and the Tanya was written for us, but the Tanya is speaking to Anoshim Kekeinu, to simple people, what I'm calling Torah v'Shamayim, Torah as you're learning it in heaven. When it says that in the nefesh habamis of a yid, there's yeshba gam kein tev, it has good character. It doesn't mean I'm going to write a check and you're going to give me honor. I'm going to write you a check and I'm going to give you honor. That's klipa. You did a good thing. But the chayas of that good thing is compromised by the fact that your interest is not doing an act of kindness, it's doing something for yourself. In other words, in plain English, when the Alter Rebbe says in these couple of lines that in the nefesh habahamis there is rachmanis, gemilas chasadim, it means altruistic rachmanis, altruistic gemilas chasadim. What does altruism mean? Altruism is a fancy word. Altruism means I am doing something just for the sake of what I'm doing, and there's no reciprocity. I will get nothing in return. I am doing something for you, and there's absolutely nothing in it for me. When a person does something altruistically, they're only doing it because it's true, and because it's right. When the Alter Rebbe says he does rachmanis, and when the Alter Rebbe says he does gemilas chasadim, it means a yid has a capacity to compassion. A Yid has a capacity to be kind in his animal soul, mind you. In his nefesh habamis, in his animal soul, that's not at all reciprocal. When a Yid gives tzedakah, the fact is, the teva of Yidden is to give tzedakah. I always say the same speeches. Avraham Avinu taught the world 3 lessons that the world has learned well. And we are the transmitters. We, Jewish people, teach these 3 lessons to the world for the last 4,000 years. The first lesson is the lesson of Achdus Hashem, monotheism, one God. The second lesson, and I'm putting it in this order to make my point, is chinuch, to teach our children to be like us, not to make their own choices, to be like us, to learn good from us and to be in our image. That's what chinuch means. And the third is tzedakah. Avraham Avinu taught the world charity, and by Yidden and tzedakah is in their teva. It's a fact, you see it. Jewish people are incredibly forgiving, incredibly compassionate, and incredibly charitous. So the Alter Rebbe says it's in the nature of a Jew. Not just the neshama of a Yid has rachmanis, not just the godly soul of a Jew has a capacity to give. The animal soul, the nefesh habahamis, the selfish soul of a Jew. That's what nefesh habahamis is. It's a self-centered soul. That's the meaning of an animal. In the world of an animal, the center of the universe is self. The nefesh habahamis of a Yid is different than most human beings, that its selfish drive feels another person's pain and gives somebody else kindness that's non-reciprocal. There's nothing in it for me. It's the teva of a Yid. This is very interesting and very special. You want to argue about it? We can argue about it. But this is what the Alter Rebbe holds, because this is a mitzvah advarim, that the nefesh habahamis of a Yid, not that he gives just charity. A lot of people do charity. A Yid gives tzedakah and he's doing it just because it's right. He feels another person's pain and he gives to another person without any reciprocity. He doesn't think at all how it's going to serve his interest, how it's going to be honored and be given, his name is going to be in the paper. He just kindness. And the chiddush of the Tanya is that doesn't necessarily come from the neshama. The animal soul of a Yid has real good. And the meaning of real good is altruistic good. Good that does not serve me. Good that serves only the Eibishter. And this is what the Alter Rebbe says in these couple of lines. That the Gam Midas Tevis, I'll read it again, even good character, Shebeteva, which is in the nature of Kol Yisrael B'Toldesim, of the Jewish people from birth, K'mei Rachmonus or Gemilas Chasadim, like compassion and kindness, Bois Mimena, come from this animal soul. Even though the very meaning of an animal soul, what's an animal? We talked about this a lot, right? An animal doesn't necessarily mean a predator who rips other animals to pieces to eat lunch. An animal can be eating grass. What makes an animal an animal? The first thing that makes an animal is the only interest that the animal has is itself. Animals have no curiosity. They have no interest in improving their lives and finding out where they come from and why they exist and what their destiny is. They want to eat grass or whatever it is they eat, leaves and grass and so forth. And the third characteristic of the animal soul, as I always tell you, which animals may not necessarily have, is innate fear. Is a worry. Is a daige. You're always worried. Like the word yells, what happens if I eat up the whole earth? What am I going to eat then? This is the character of the animal soul. So the animal soul is a selfish creature. We're talking about the animal soul of a Yid. The godly soul of a Yid, we'll talk about it in Pedic Beis, in chapter 2. The animal soul of a Yid, the way the Eibishter made the behemoth, the selfish drive within a Jew, has an unbelievable capacity for compassion, an unbelievable capacity for kindness. Now I want to say one more thing, and then next week I will reread the same couple of lines. It's not going to happen again. Don't get excited. And we'll learn some more. I just want to say one more gewaldige word. The Rebbe has a lot of notes on these few. On the Tanya, the Rebbe has many, many notes. But on these couple of lines, that makes a fascinating point. Everybody knows, there's a Gemara, that the Gemara says, and there's not community even the halacha from this, that the Gemara says, Uf Yoshalu Mazu, Jewish people have a certain set of character traits that define them. Jewish people have certain natures, in quotations. And they bring rayas to this from the Gevoinim, that they didn't have these midas, or they're not also ever call, and so on. What are they? 3 of them. Rachmanis, which means compassion. Baishonis means bashfulness, a tendency towards shame. And Gemilas Chasadim, which means kindness and tzedakah. So the Rebbe says, how come the Alter Rebbe leaves out Baishonis? If a Yid has, the Gemara says a Yid has 3 character traits: kindness, compassion, and bashfulness. How come the Alter Rebbe brings only 2? And the Rebbe says a Gvaldik Avot, the Moedim Avot. He says a Yid has a Nefesh Lakis and a Yid has a Nefesh Bamis. A Jew has a godly soul and a Jew has an animal soul. The animal of a Jew, the selfish drive of a Jew, is a chutzpahnik. It's not bashful at all. The Gemara says, Yisrael azin shabumis, the most bold and fearless and chutzpahnik. If you look in the dictionary, the translation of chutzpah is chutzpah in the English dictionary. People on earth are Jews. Jews have a lot of chutzpah. It's true. If we didn't have a lot of chutzpah, it wouldn't be around. You cannot say that the nefesh habahamis and the animal soul of a Yid is bashful. It's not true. Yid not chutzpah yakis. So where does Midas Abusha come from? That's taken in Nefesh Lakis. When the Gemara says there are 3 character traits that define a Jew, Rachmanis, Gmilas Chasodim, and by Shonis there's a difference. Compassion and kindness is part of the animal nature of a Yid. The selfish drive within a Jew has a capacity for kindness. A non-reciprocal, altruistic kindness, altruistic compassion. If somebody hurts, you hurt with them. I've told this to you before, I saw this in a book, that during the Inquisition, which went on for hundreds of years, yet it started, when did it start? In 1480. The Inquisition started. The expulsion was in 1492. But the Inquisition started in 1480. It went on for several centuries. And they killed Yidden. They found Jews, Moranos, they killed them. One of the ways they identified a Jew is they would see how people responded at bullfights. The Spanish are into the bullfights, right? The matador, the bullfighter, and it doesn't always happen. I mean, bullfighting is such a sick sport. It's literally a blood sport. It's almost like the Romans with the gladiators. It's a sick sport, and it goes on adayim azeh. It's like you can see it today, where they torture an animal. They poke those sticks into the animal's pushed bleeding. They're torturing. It's a delight, and it happens that sometimes the animal will raise a human being up with his horns and rip his tishkis to pieces. Kill a human being, and it's a sport. And they would see how people responded. If the person responded by being aghast and shocked and upset, you get Jewish blood. That's how the Spaniards identified Jews, who were on the outside totally Catholic, very, very goyish. They were not Chassidish Yidden. They were barely holding on to their roots, because a Yid cannot watch another human being suffer and find it entertaining. This is not from the neshama. This is from nefesh habamis. The animal soul of a Yid is a rachman and a gemach chesed. By shonas, bashfulness is also part of the Jewish character, but that comes from tahara. That comes from the neshama. That doesn't come from the nefesh habamis. So the reason the Alter Rebbe leaves by shonas out here is because when we are reading in the end of chapter 1 about the midas tevis, the good character of a Yid, understand that we're talking about the good character of the animal soul of a Yid. The animal is a selfish creature. Every human being, a Jew and a non-Jew, has an animal soul. The center of the animal soul is self. That's what it is. The center of its reality is self. And the idea that by a Yid there is an animal soul, and yet there are certain midas tevis that he or she possesses that are not self-centered, but they're altruistic. This is unique to a Jewish person because of the nature of the nefesh habahamis, that it comes from what's called klipas nega. Mashenkin, by shonis, it comes to the nefesh halakis. Okay, we're going to stop, and we're going to learn Hayom Yom. You know when was the last time we learned Hayom Yom? Daled Shvat. That's 4 months. Now let's see if the next time we do it, it'll be a little more frequent. We've been so busy. Okay, so we'll take a break, and then we'll learn Hayom Yom. The Alter Rebbe says it's altruistic. Now, Frextakasha.
No, I'm saying, so that's from the point of the nefesh.
I understand. I hear the question. I got the question loud and clear. I understand the question. I can't answer the question with any authority. I know I can't prove it. But there is a difference between feeling compassion for somebody else because you relate to their suffering, and feeling compassion for somebody else because you actually feel what they're feeling. In other words, there's an idea that a person sees another person suffers and it disturbs him because he visualizes it as being himself. And there's an idea a person sees another person suffer and he actually experiences what they're experiencing. The big difference. Prove it. Prove it. What this Alter Rebbe says. Okay, we'll take a break and then we'll do Hayom.